Excited to become more of a part of it this summer. Thanks, Paul, for having me. And as he referenced, I sail a lot of Snipes, and I coach a lot of opties. That's my job, is coaching opties. So again, being relatively new to J70s and more experienced watching other relatively slow boats sail upwind, I think that we'll confine this talk to first beat, tactics, strategy, and a little bit of starting. And yeah, but I think that there's a lot of similarities between a Snipe and a J70. Obviously, both super competitive classes, and also the main foil on both boats really needs a lot of flow to function. So speed is really a process, not a setting, that you need to generate a lot of flow on the J70 because it's a pretty high aspect ratio keel, that if you just strap in your sails and try to point, that the boat will go sideways for a while before it achieves its actual top speed. And the Snipe is the same. It's not a high performance foil, it's a plate, so that also needs a lot of flow to function. So yeah, so we'll get started. And by the way, if you have any questions, just in the middle of this, it can be interactive. Please raise your hand and interrupt me. And yeah, I'm going too fast, going too slow. You have a question, you want to comment, because there's a lot of really good sailors in this room, for sure. Okay, first of all, somebody could help me define the topic of this. What is tactics? Anyone? What do you feel like tactics is?
Having a game plan.
Okay, having a game plan. Good. Yep.
It's how you interact with other boats to execute your strategy.
Great. Love it. Love it. Yeah, that's a good one. How you interact with other boats to execute your strategy, right? So I guess we could kind of go a little bit. What is tactics not? Like, what is strategy? I have a definition, but anyone want to give me what is strategy? Yes.
Strategy is the fastest way to get around the course, absent all other boats.
Perfect. Yep. Took the words right out of my mouth. Right. Strategy is how, for me, is how you would sail if there were no other boats. If sailing were just a time trial, right? So it's the optimal tack at all times. It's sailing in the most pressure. It's playing the current correctly. So yeah, strategy is the optimal way around the race course. And as you correctly put it, like tactics is like just how you manage other boats while trying to achieve your strategy. So I have some obligatory quotes. Dennis Conner says, "I'd rather be fast than smart." I think that's super important to keep in mind, that we can get, over micro focus on tactics and what's going on immediately around us, and it, like, sailing fast is always the first priority, and I would give up a lot of brain cells to be just a little bit faster, and that's why you should help with wet sanding the bottom and doing all that boat things. But for sure, anything that you can do to make your boat faster, whatever your position on it is, whether it's showing up for practice, whether it's learning more about sail trim, dynamic control adjustment in any boat is really important. As the wind velocity changes, our sail shapes change. Getting out with a coach, seeing video of the boat, that's always good to see on video. Like your skipper can say, "Hey guys, we need to sit together on the rail," but like when you see the video of you social distancing on the rail with your crewmates, then you put it together, and definitely looking at leash shapes. So buying new sails, anything you can do to go faster is going to make you seem smarter. All right, got some Art of War. Tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. Has anyone here read the Art of War? How is it?
Orent.
Okay.
It's a hard read. I mean, that's the real answer. It's a hard read, but it's great.
It's not really the kind of book that you read. You kind of go there for inspiration or wisdom.
Okay, for the quotes.
Yeah.
I've never read it. Just wondering about that. Okay, Michael Blackburn. This is from from a guided meditation that I strongly recommend, Sailing Mind Skills. You can get it on iTunes. And Michael Blackburn got a bronze medal in the laser, and then I think coached 3 gold medalists for Australia. So it says, when your strategy is correct, your boat speed is adequate, your tactics will be logical and obvious. Again, when your strategy is correct and your boat speed is adequate, your tactics will be logical and obvious. So I think that that's very true, that most tactics can be like pretty straightforward. It's kind of like what you think is the best option from where you are right now, given your strategic aims. And also like planning ahead a little bit, I think is important for tactics too, especially on boats that require some coordination. Okay, some Bob Dylan. Everything passes, everything changes, just do what you think you should do. So I think that's important as well. You know, in terms of doing things quickly, having good speed, it's important to commit to your strategy. You know, as Michael Blackburn says, the race is always from here on out. Ignore past mistakes, focus on sailing fast and looking around. Okay, some goals for tactics. As we said, ability to pursue your strategy with clear air, with minimal taps, depending on the boats, the conditions, right? Coach Bradley will tell you probably that there are light air conditions in Z420s where we're actually looking for excuses to tap. So that's definitely not true in all boats. But in a J70, I don't think that you can gain speed from your tacks in any condition, and not in a Snipe either. So minimizing tacks is a goal, right? Getting around the marks cleanly, and that leads to complementary sailing. You can have a great run, but if you're outside of the pinwheel at the leeward mark, that's not going to lead to a good last beat. So for sure, having a good rounding that sets up your strategy for the next leg, right? If you're over the ley line on the first beat, you're not really going to have the option necessarily to jibe right, to jibe set, right? If you're, you know, outside of other boats coming around the mark, then I'm a little bit committed to this strategy of the high lane on the beginning of the run, right? I can't flop it over there. There are boats on starboard. So for sure, having clean mark roundings, because we don't want to foul, we don't want to have to jibe out and sail back to the windward mark, or like circle around the green can as we did on a Wednesday this summer. So yeah, that's a goal of tactics. Managing risk. That's an aspect of tactics that I think sometimes gets overstressed. I think that sometimes, like if we're looking backwards too much in the fleet and trying to cover too much, we're going backwards. But we can think of tactical risk in terms of leverage. So leverage is a term that's just the separation across the course of two boats, right? This is their leverage. So the red boat has a lot of leverage on the blue boat, right? And they both have some leverage on the yellow boat. And so your leverage is basically going to result in the size of your gain or loss on a wind shift, right? If the wind shifts this way and the ladder rung swings like this, I've gained a boat length on this boat that I had 5 lengths leverage on. I've gained more boat lengths on a boat that I had more leverage on. So your separation across the course is basically your risk. And this isn't like a hard and fast thing. Again, I think that sometimes we stress managing risk too much because rarely do wind shifts fill evenly across the course, right? There's going to be a period where, you know, if it's a small fanning puff, that, you know, this boat is getting lifted off the table, right? That they're like pointing like this, and these boats are still in the old wind pointing like that. And so then it wasn't so much a leverage situation. But I think that it's, right, it's not like We're not just playing like first generation virtual regatta. But yeah, tactics is about managing risk. And if I'm super fast, I'm gonna take smaller risks. If I'm really slow, I'm gonna take big risks also, right? Like pursue David strategies, right? So you can think about it in terms of that as well, you know, and I coach sailors to do that like based on the conditions. Like if you're a big kid in an opti in light wind, you're gonna have to start at an end, get a really good start, and maybe be accepting of a little more risk. If you're faster than everyone else on that day, the dumbest thing you can do is to be OCS, right? So I think understanding like your strengths and weaknesses for that day, and then leverage for the conditions. And there will come a point in the summer where you're all aware of your position in the series for the fleet, or a point in every regatta where you're generally aware of your position. And so then you're kind of thinking about leverage a little bit versus some of your closest competition. So yeah, putting points, not losing too many points in a series. Again, never stop thinking strategically. Tactics is a window to your strategy. Okay, so let's talk about strategy, because this is the most important thing, right? In general terms, I like to think about conditions as how stable or unstable they are. So as you're sailing out, first you look at the forecast, and then as you're sailing out, and always what you see over what you predict, you're kind of determining how stable are the conditions today, right? What I mean by that is how shifty, what type of shifts, right? So a huge factor for the stability of the wind is surface heating, right? Do we have surface heating? If the water is warmer than the air, you're going to have really, really, really unstable conditions. Like random shifts out of nowhere, no rhyme or reason to the puffs and lulls, and it's going to be super unstable. And a way to kind of understand this is you boil a pot of water, right? And you begin to see the smoke come up, and it doesn't all come up straight and uniform. It's doing like crazy circles, right? So that's, you know, what surface heating does to the breeze, and then imagine like a breeze trying to blow through that, how unstable it's going to get. Beyond surface heating of the water, there's surface heating of the land, right? To windward, to leeward, one side of the course. So I think always, not just observing like the geography of the horizon that you see, but like look at Google Maps of the area around where you're going to be racing, and like how much green versus how much blacktop is there, right? Like a parking lot is going to heat more than you know, a marsh, which is going to heat more than a forest. So kind of look at the stability of the land to windward, and then obviously like how hot a day is it going to be? How long has the land to windward been heating, right? Where you guys sail the Thursday night course in late afternoon in the summer. Usually the water is colder than the air, but you have a heated land to windward that's been heating all day, right? So that leads to some instability. Clouds and the type of clouds, okay? In general, an overcast sky is going to make the wind less stable. It's shiftier when it's cloudier. Also, partly because it's going to be a little cooler relative to the water temperature, but clouds make it less stable. Then you're looking at, are there types of clouds that are predictive of wind shifts because they're causing the wind shifts? So I'm not going to go too much into that, but basically, like, you know, if you have a rain cloud, and you see with your polarized glasses, like the rain on the water here, right? That's going to be displacing air going out from it in all directions, and you want to be positioning yourself between the fleet and the rain cloud. Now, it's always good to kind of have noticed as you're sailing out, which way are the clouds moving, right? Which way are the clouds moving? Because if it's moving rapidly here and you see the cloud at 5 minutes, and okay, you're gonna start in a huge lefty, but then when the cloud passes, the wind's probably going to go back to where it was before the rain cloud influenced it. So understanding which way the sky is moving, we had a Opti orange bowl, 2019, where on the second to last race, Griggs, who I was not coaching, ended up on the right, and the clouds were moving really fast this way across the course. And he got a rain cloud and got a big righty and won the race. Then the next race, Gil, who I was coaching, looked, no clouds. Okay, I'm gonna stick with going left, because going left always works in Miami, except when it doesn't. And Griggs again got the false positive of thinking, okay, the right's paying, not understanding why. Went right again, Gil went left, and was able to win the regatta. So, but it was very interesting that the wind's from here, and the clouds are moving this way, right? So that happens a lot, and my dad has a pretty good quote, actually. Sailing's about who can be the most observant. So as you're sailing out, look at the sky, which way are the clouds moving? What types of clouds? Other clouds that are generally predictive, but not immediately predictive to a small race course. Brian, you want to answer this one for me? What?
I like just darker, taller clouds, ones that project like less light through them. I always seem to find like darker clouds equals more breeze a lot of times.
Okay, good. Yeah, so that's immediately predictive to our racing area. So we want to look for those, for sure. Yeah, right. It doesn't have to just be a rain cloud. Yeah, the super dense, dark ones usually create pressure as well. And honestly, like, I'm still learning more about this. So like, it's a subject that I'd like to explore more. General clouds that are gonna, like, not in your racing area, but the low puffy clouds on land mean that there might be like a sea breeze later, right? So when you see those, because they're indicating the condensation rising up off of the land. So that might be like a persistent shift coming later. But a lot of times we're not racing like during that persistent shift, right? Like a lot of times, like when the sea breeze comes, it starts to go right, but then by the time the race committee has the mark set to the new wind, it's actually already at its max right, and it goes back left a tick. So, but in terms of like planning your day, how long can I nap in the village for? When are we gonna eat our sandwiches? You know, the sea breeze clouds are good for knowing a sea breeze is coming. After I'm kind of determining if it's a stable or an unstable day, how fast are the puffs moving? How big are they? What shape? If there's a big elevation change of the wind, maybe there's mountains to windward, maybe there's a lot of surface heating to windward. Now the puffs are going to be dropping down out of the sky and fanning out, right? And so they're going to be pretty localized, and you actually want to sail from the inside out of the puff is the most lift, right? So fanning puffs, like, okay, we have fanning puffs, or maybe we don't if it's like light laminar flow. How big are they, right? Kind of prioritizing like pressure and angle, right? Are we sailing to the compass, or are we sailing to our eyes, looking up the course to spot the next breeze? And kind of a good way I like to think about it is how many shifts per beat are we gonna have, right? And that might be like a kind of a debrief after the first race of like, okay, how many shifts were there on the beat, and do we expect that to continue? Of a way of like timing your crosses on the fleet. Stable versus unstable, there's a kind of a way to quantify this. My former colleague Mauricio sent me this email, requested when I was thinking about this, of Frank Bethwaite's stability index and Fred Moffat's modifications to it. So you've got least stable score, neutral score, most stable score, and your factors are heat transfer, so surface heating, surface boundary depth, and atmospheric pressure. So there's like actual ways to quantify like how stable or unstable, but for me generally I'm like, okay, is the water or the air warmer, and are there clouds, and where's the land around? Geographic effects, right? How does the land impact things? And what's like a geographic effect in the normal J70 racing area that you guys see? Like, how does the geography, is there like, are there any patterns from the geography of Bay Ridge to Windward?
One that I know for sure is that there's generally more current when you're in the middle of the river. You know? And it seems like there's like a lot of patterns that are like, you know, it might not really be like, because we get so many different breeze directions throughout the year, but you know, it seems like you get into shore, and the closer you get to shore, the more like lifted it seems to like ride along the shoreline there.
Okay, cool. So I would say, yeah, like, and for sure where we do the TSOD course and the Snipe course, you know, you have, let's just say like Bay Ridge, right? And here's the Capitol building, here's Annapolis. Yay, here's that, here's the Severn River, this is SSA. Right, so as we go out and we kind of have like this type of wind off of the shore, you have a way to make both sides work. You're gonna have shoreline lifts off of the right, because the wind is like most high schoolers. It just wants to do whatever's easiest, right? So if it's on the wind, on the land, is the fastest path off of the shore that, or that?
Choice B.
Is this, right? So the wind is going to curve to get off the land, and we call these shoreline lifts. That said, the land is also creating a little bit of a lull, and you're gonna get left pressure. So for the TSOD course, for the Snipe course actually out further, I don't know my directions here yet. Past the radio towers. It's shoreline lifts versus left pressure. So you could make either side pay, but just know if you want to go left, you got to bang the left to get the pressure and come in on the port ley line. Or if you want to play the right, you're sailing for angle. You're going right until you get a shift. Okay, tacking on that shift. Okay, we're starting to cave, like getting headed versus the fleet. Things are not looking good. Back to our side. Okay, now another shift. Now back, right? So it's like chutes and ladders, but so that's in that breeze direction, right? And anywhere you're sailing with an angled shoreline, you have the potential for shoreline lifts. You also have the potential for shoreline lulls.
How close in do you have to get to the shoreline to benefit from the lift? I imagine pretty close.
Well, it's the leverage question then. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, but I don't know if it's leverage because it's just angles. I would say like, you want to see the pop, right? And then as soon as you get it, you want to tack on it, right? But I would say the shoreline lifts come out pretty far, pretty far.
And it's fairly obvious on Thursday night courses, like where the lee of the shore starts. Don't cross the line.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we call that the front zone.
Exactly.
Now, is there like a range or an angle of, you know, the shift that, you know, where do you determine like precisely where you're gonna tack?
oh man.
So I think that it's, as I'll get into this with the pre-start routine, but I think that you want to be seeing what's kind of your average angle on each tack with the compass, right? So just sailing upwind before each start is super helpful to kind of get a feel for that. And you know, you can also kind of look at the land around you, like, okay, I'm headed, right? Okay, I'm lifted, right? But the compass is super helpful for with that, getting kind of an average. And And I think also just looking for the pressure, especially when it's flat water enough, because you guys sail pretty close to Bay Ridge, that it's flat enough to really see the wind on the water. This is a total tangent, but I think Dave Hughes had like a promotion thing on this, but I tried it and it works. Brown lenses for foggy days, dark polarized lenses for sunny days. You see the wind so much better. And then when you lose one of them, at least you have a backup pair of sunglasses. So, yeah, shoreline lifts can be a factor everywhere, but also shore can create a lull when it's angled. When it's not angled, let's say we move this wouldn't be Annapolis, but let's just say we're in, well, I'll leave Annapolis there. Let's just say this is Garda, and wind's coming like this. Now you're not gonna get angle from the land, but you're gonna get compression, because the air gets squeezed together, and so if it's a parallel shore, you will get usually more pressure along it. If it's an angled shore, you get a lull, but some wind shifts. Make sense? Yes?
Well, I think that your example is missing, just between Annapolis and Garda, the difference is height. So you see this if you go places like San Francisco and you sail along the city line, or especially in Lake Garda, the mountains are on both sides. So if you're sailing in the morning at Garda before the breezes started coming in between the mountains, totally different situation.
Yep.
But getting in towards the shore, it's more like you're in Annapolis. Once that breeze starts coming down the lake, totally different story.
Right. The north wind, the Pilar there is super shifty.
Yeah.
The aura was kind of what I was referencing, and we have this at Snipe World in La Bella, that there were mountains on the right and compression on the right. And then we had it on, so it seems like there's a lot of like world-renowned venues where the strategy is just to bang the right. Not really my favorite type of sailing, but.
Right, but that's why if you have a regatta in San Francisco, for instance, when the Snipe Worlds were there in 2016, we sailed at the Richmond Circle, because that took that out of the game.
Okay.
So.
Yeah.
I think
That's interesting about the city front. I didn't know that.
Oh,
I bought college nationals there, so thank you.
Arthur,
Yeah.
can you go, so let's go back to like the Thursday night course.
Yeah.
It's possible when the course gets set up that the weather mark might be closer to the land, or might be set up so that the weather mark is kind of farther away from the land. And so when we see that the proximity of the weather mark to the shore, and we're trying to think about the options, so one is play the shifts, the other one's bang the left. The farther that mark comes to the left, when does it how do you think about it as you start to move away from the shore? How far away from the shore do the shifts no longer really help?
I don't know for a fact. I haven't raced that course that many times in this kind of like wraparound sea breeze, right? I guess we would call it. My sense would be, because where we sail the Snipes is much further from the shore, but we get kind of the same things, that the Bay Ridge point affects the wind almost anywhere that you sail in Annapolis. I would also say though that as you move further out from land, to Brian's point, the current becomes more of a factor, because you're a little bit closer to the channel, and there's a depth differential. So like the Wednesday night races are pretty crazy with managing the shoreline righties that you know that you're going to get, but positive or negative current on the left side of the course, and then you can't even bang the left corner because there's someone put a sandbar there, and that course is hard. When I sailed the Thursday night with Allie, the wind had already come kind of to the right all the way over, right? And a sea breeze in the late afternoon will go right usually, right, at the very end of the day. So I think a lot of times you don't really have that angled shore to wind, where you just have land to windward. Right? Is that like a direction you guys sail in a lot on Thursdays, right? So it's not a shoreline lift on either side. You're gonna get oscillations off of both sides. You know it's pretty unstable because you have heated land to windward. But the geographic effect that I would look for there is it Lake Ogleton? What's the lake called?
Yeah.
Lake Ogleton, right? The wind is gonna do what's easiest. You're pretty much always gonna have more pressure touching down and then coming out of the lake. So noting that lake's position relative to the windward mark might be predictive of where there's going to be more pressure at the top of the beat. And I think like the definition of, okay, what's the difference between a geographic shift and an oscillating shift? An oscillating shift is back and forth, back and forth. It could be random oscillating, right? If it's super unstable, a sea breeze will oscillate and you could time it, right? So it could be random oscillating or like a pendulum that you could time. A geographic shift is a pattern that repeats itself, right? That reoccurs and is because of the geography around the racing area. So geographic shifts, I think that you can learn about from one beat to the next, even within the first race of the evening, right? If one side paid for a beat or two beats, like, oh, and there's Lake Ogleton, now I remember. Let's go there. Current, big factor, depending on where you're racing, right? I would say, so let's just break current down into plus minus or cross current, right? Positive current is pushing me up the beat, negative is pushing me down, right? Plus current pushing me over the line, negative current pushing me under the line. So these are like just words that I encourage you to use to just kind of have easy communication. Okay, we have positive current, we have negative current. There's positive and negative current. I'm looking for current shear, which is current running faster on one side of the course than another. So this is a pretty cool program called Current Lab that we've been using for Miami for years. And they've just put a lot of their good maps on the pro version. We're looking at getting that. And I think the Annapolis map, this is Annapolis, there's the Bay Bridge, there's the harbor. I think it has a little work to do on their model because it has current running over what's actually land. But it's a super cool animation of what the current's doing. So, and I believe that this is the end of the low change that they predicted, that you're going to have current running out in the main channel for longer, but beginning to run in up into Annapolis. So here, you know, where we sailed the AYC annual, there's potential for current going in different directions on the race course, and there's definitely potential for more current on one half of the course than another. And I think when you sail, you know, your real regattas out in the bay, looking at the tankers, they're great current indicators of when the current switches in the main channel. And then just with experience, like, does it change first in the shallow water? Does it you know, how long does it take for the shallows to match the deep water? But generally, current flows faster in deep water, flows slower in shallow water. The water likes to do what's easiest. And generally it will change faster in the shallow water, but I think that there are exceptions to that.
So there's also pretty good indicators, right? You see a tide line and you can see like the scum that, you know, that's a pretty good indication that there's something going on with the water.
Good, very good, right, yeah. As Lucas Calabrese told me, the surface of the water tells you what lies beneath, right? The surface of the water tells you what lies beneath. So if you know, this is the example, and I have the wind out of the south coming up the bay, and I have the tankers showing ebb, right? What I'm gonna see is much choppier, and then here's kind of Bay Ridge, is much choppier water on the left side of the course, indicating more current against wind, right? So you're gonna see choppy, blockish waves. And you're gonna see more flat waves where there's less current or where there's current with the wind, right? So for sure, that's exactly what you wanna be looking for current shear. And in general, if it's positive or negative current, upwind, I'm looking for that chop. I'm looking for like, it's gonna feel like a washing machine, the boat's gonna feel really shitty, but you're on like a conveyor belt